Your income is not determined by a job. It's determined by how your brain is programmed to think about money. And most people don't realize that their brain was programmed years ago by parents, teachers, and society. When I was a teenager, I accidentally discovered something that allowed me to change that programming. At first, it changed my behavior. Later, it changed my results. And today, I want to show you exactly how that mechanism works. Hey, I'm Ravi Gabis, and welcome back to the Ravi Gabis Show, where we unlock the secrets of real wealth every single day. If you want to understand how money actually works, not just investing, but the psychology and the thinking behind wealth, subscribe to the channel. Here we talk about capital creation, financial mindset, business, and practical strategies for building real wealth. And if you want to go deeper, there's also a free webinar in the description below where I explain the system of building capital step by step. You can watch it after this episode. Now let's continue. We already know that beliefs determine your results. Your financial beliefs and the way you think determine the results that you have in life. In previous episodes, I explained the strategy of how beliefs are created and the mechanisms of how beliefs appear in your brain. First, you hear something, then you say something, then you think about it, you repeat it again and again, and this is how a belief appears in your mind. One of the most important parts of this process is thinking, the way you think. Because when information comes to you, you start thinking about it, and the way you think determines whether that information becomes a belief or not. So thinking is one of the most important parts of this process. But for many people, controlling their thinking is not easy because of the way our brain works. According to millions of years of evolution, our brain pays about 18 times more attention to negative things than to positive things. This is connected to the survival of humanity. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, life was dangerous. There were predators, wild animals, and constant threats. You could be killed at any moment if you were not cautious. So humans had to constantly watch for danger. But today, the situation is completely different. Nobody is constantly threatening your life. We have laws, we have police, we have armies, we have institutions. And today, one of the most sacred things in society is human life. So most people feel relatively safe, but the brain is still operating with the same ancient survival program. It still pays much more attention to negative things. And today, this doesn't always help you. Yes, caution is important, but if you're too cautious, you cannot move forward. You cannot achieve your goals. You stay exactly where you are, inside your comfort zone. So to move forward, you must be willing to take risks. And this is connected to how our brain works. There are many systems in the body, but three major systems strongly influence how we make decisions, including financial decisions. The first one is the sympathetic system. This system is responsible for survival. It has two basic reactions: fight or run away. In everyday life, this looks like this. Either you start fighting false with something or you ignore it. For example, when you receive a new business opportunity, an investment opportunity, or a new job offer, you may start thinking, this investment is risky. This won't work. This is dangerous. Or you just ignore it completely. You say, I already make my $40,000 per year here. Why risk changing jobs or trying something new? That is the survival system speaking. The second system is the parasympathetic system. These two systems are very old, about 150 million years old. The second system is responsible for avoiding suffering and seeking pleasure. It has two main directions: avoid pain or increase pleasure, excitement, euphoria, comfort. Let's take an example. Imagine you want to buy a house. There are two ways to do it. Option one, save money over time and buy the house later. Option two, take a mortgage immediately. If the house is not an investment but simply a place to live, the first option is usually financially better because with a mortgage, you pay much more money through interest and insurance. But how do most people buy homes? Through a mortgage. Why? Because a mortgage creates a commitment. And if you fail to pay that commitment, suffering follows. You can lose your house. So the brain pushes you to act in order to avoid suffering first, and only then to pursue pleasure. And the third system is the cerebral system. This is the youngest system. It appeared about 2.5 million years ago. This is the human thinking brain. Scientists say that about 2.5 million years ago, this part of the brain began developing about 20% faster, and that dramatically changed the course of human history. Our task today is to activate this system because the older systems are extremely powerful. They have hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary strength. They helped humanity survive. But today, you must learn how to manage those systems with your thinking brain. Animals barely have this system, but humans do. And we can use it to influence the older systems. For example, if you convince your survival system that earning $10 million is necessary for survival, it will start working for you because that system only has two options: fight or run away. And it cannot run away if survival depends on that goal. It will fight for it. The same applies to the pleasure system. If you convince your brain that achieving $10 million will create more joy, more freedom, and more pleasure in the future, it will also support that goal. But how do you influence these systems? One of the most powerful tools is something I call internal monologue. Years ago, when I was a teenager, I started doing something interesting. At the time, I was a shy young man. I studied a lot, helped at home, and read many books, especially religious books. I read the Bible, the Quran, books about Buddhism, Krishnaism, different philosophies. I spent several years deeply interested in these topics. At that time, I was a good student, but still a shy young man. Then one day, I discovered a book by John Cahill about the subconscious mind. I don't remember the exact title, but that book introduced me to exercises for programming the mind. I began writing simple statements every day. For example, I am decisive. I would write that sentence 21 times on paper. Then I would stand in front of a mirror, look into my eyes, and repeat, I am decisive. I am decisive. I am decisive with emotion, confidently. Then I choose another statement. I am responsible. And I repeated the same process again and again. I started with very basic qualities that form the foundation of success: decisive, purposeful, responsible, brave. At that time, I didn't even think about beliefs. I didn't understand the science behind it, but I chose about five core statements and I repeated them every day. I wrote them first 21 times, then I stood in front of the mirror and repeated them emotionally. And I did this every day for 60 days. And I started noticing something interesting after a couple of months. At that time, I was a very shy guy. When I say shy, I really mean shy. I was afraid of talking to girls. If I ever talked to girls, it was usually only about religion because that was the only topic I felt confident discussing. Otherwise, I was quiet. But after practicing these exercises for a couple of months, something started changing. It almost felt like magic. I noticed that I was becoming more confident. I started talking to girls more easily. I started communicating more freely, and I liked it. And that was probably the first moment in my life when I realized that something inside the mind can actually be programmed. At that time, I didn't think about beliefs or neural connections. I didn't understand the mechanism. I just thought it was some kind of auto training. But the result was real. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was already a completely different person, just in 1 year. And then something funny happened. I applied to the faculty of literature, And in my group, there were about 30 students, but only a few of them were boys. The rest were girls. So the communication skills that I built during high school suddenly became very useful. Today it sounds funny, but then it wasn't. But back then it was very serious transformation for me. And that was probably the first time I personally experienced how changing your internal monologue can actually change your life. After that, I created new statements and I repeated the process again. I did this for years. Even 5 or 7 years ago, I remember I was still practicing this method because it was very efficient. This is how I program my beliefs. For example, I now have a short morning mantra that I repeat every day. It takes about 1 minute. I stand in front of the mirror and I repeat it in different languages. I'm programming my mind. When I woke up in the morning, I could hear those statements automatically. It was like a record playing in my mind. So I created different records, basic records such as I'm decisive, I'm powerful, I'm purposeful, or I can do everything. There was another record about finance. Money comes to me, I can make money anywhere, anytime, and so on. Another record was about mindset. The universe supports me. I deserve the best thing in this world, and so on. Different records for different states of mind. And the beauty of this system is simple. If I wake up and my mind starts thinking about something negative, I don't find the thought. I simply replace the record, and the new one starts playing automatically. That's the advantage of building these mental records. If you want to create them, follow a simple process. Repeat the statements every day for 60 days. You can work with 3 to 5 statements at the same time, but let them go deep into your brain. Let them become part of your nature. That's why, by the way, my course lasts about 2.5 months because this is roughly the time needed for new neural connections to become strong. The brain needs time to build those pathways, neural connections. Later, I didn't even need to repeat them aloud. Sometimes I just wrote them on paper to reinforce the neural path, because once the record exists, controlling your thinking becomes much easier. You don't have to constantly fight for your thoughts. You simply change the record, because conscious control is very difficult. Your brain always tries to return to ancient survival patterns formed by hundreds of millions of years of evolution. And fighting those systems directly is very, very difficult. But you can reprogram them. So try this method. Today we talked about how internal monologue can literally change the way your brain works. And if you learn to control that internal monologue, you can start building completely new beliefs about money, success, and opportunity. Tomorrow we'll go even deeper and talk about specific techniques you can use to install new financial beliefs. If you're serious about increasing your income and building capital, subscribe to the channel. And if you want a structured system for building wealth step by step, the free webinar is waiting for you in the description below. I'm Ravi Gabis. See you in the next episode.